who are the actual traditional leaders and try and help them to understand why it's important for them to insist that the royalties are paid and that jobs are created beyond extraction. In terms of government doing better than the previous government, there's no doubt about that. They've done some things. But Professor Modi sitting here will tell you that in the 70s, when he did research in the mining areas, the conditions he found there, they're still there. I've been there myself. There is nothing to show. The workers are still living in conditions that you yourself would not even think of visiting. And I was telling you that I've been there. People are so ashamed to allow me to their quarters. The living conditions, there is nothing to show. Children have no playgrounds. There are no schools. Kids are being bused outside the mining precinct to go to school. Roads, you just can't drive there. And of course, when you look at the working conditions themselves, prove to me that there are changes. We have studies that we call policy gaps. When you go into these communities, in fact, more damage is being done by the mining houses in those communities. Now, how much more underground for those people who work under those conditions? I was there just 2 weeks ago. I was told by the miners that everybody talks about people that are being killed because of the strike, but nobody's saying anything about people who have died underground since the strike started. Because the conditions are such that people are taking risk with their lives. And when that happens, the company pretends all is well. So, you can challenge me, but the truth is, people are still where they were 20 years ago. This government said, for instance, in their policy, companies must provide decent living accommodation for the workers. Why would people take a living out wage and go and sleep in a tin shack? Have you ever thought about that? Because they are trying to create an environment that is more acceptable to them than what the companies are providing. And what they are getting is not enough. And they are asking now to say, we also want to afford decent housing. Pay us 12,500. We also want to drive cars like all of you. We also want to take our children to good schools to be educated. And can you blame them for that? No, I wouldn't. And this is why I personally have taken side to be on the side of the workers as Trevor has challenged us. Thank you.
Can I abuse the fact that I have a microphone? A pet hate of mine at these events is that only men put up their hand and ask the questions. So I'm just going to put that out there. And not only that, but they get picked. Not like Gavin, who would never do such a thing.
He would never do such a thing, which is why Miriam is the very first person who's going to speak. But can I see hands for any other speakers, please? I notice as well we've got some people from different sides of the mining industry here, the rural communities, also representing Labour, so if they would like to give us their views on what's been said. So just before Miriam, who is next, please? Okay, so you're next, and then it's you. Thank you very much. Miriam.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for a much needed report. I have two questions. I'm sure most of the people in this room know the answer to that first question, so I excuse myself to them. I would just like you to clarify a little bit the difference between Longmin and the other two companies if their profit has been historically or lower or at present lower. I don't fully understand. And the other one is, you still speak, the media, everyone speaks of an unpredictable future for the price of gold, the number of platinum, the number of platinum sold, and all of that. But isn't it curious, since in this country sitting most, I think 82% of future platinum to be extracted? How comes this unpredictability? Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Gregory, to your that side, no, behind you there.
Thank you very much. My name is Claude Kabemba, and I work for the Southern Africa Resource Watch. I have not read the report, but I just want to ask if in your analysis you did factor in the issue around capital investment of these mining companies. Because I will imagine that if these companies have already captured back their capital investment, the distribution, or the model of distribution will change. Because I don't think that shareholders will continue to take more if they've already gotten back their money. The Botswana model speaks to that. Today, the Botswana government gets 51% and DPS 49%, because the Botswana government said we cannot continue to give you more when you've already taken your capital investment. This is our resources, we need to get more. Then I want to know if you factor this model into your analysis. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Hi, the name is Krupin Pillai, researcher at the Wits School of Governance. Short question. The question I'd like to ask is, aren't we at a tipping point, a major tipping point in the country's history? The last one we had was in the mid-80s, which led to 1994. And if I can just elaborate, I think adding to what the Reverend said, we spoke about dignity and so on, and if I can take it a little backward, aren't we talking about the state of morality? Aren't we talking about the state of ethics? And to talk in the Reverend's language, in the last couple of decades, and in the last 2 decades, it's gone even worse. The state of poverty, the state of unemployment, the state of inequality. And if you look at the last couple of years, we've had Marikana, we've got the Platinum Belt now, we've had Nkanda, and we've got the impact of BEE on these social sins. And I think the question that we need to ask, recently sitting with my colleagues in the ANC, they disagreed with me on this issue of inequality and the wages. And the question they asked me is, do you really believe that by paying the workers 12 now, we'll be able to solve the problem? And I said, I don't believe it's the issue of paying. It's the issue of what state of mind, what good faith are we entering negotiations in? How do you justify a director taking 20, 30 million and then we having an issue of paying 12,500? And I think to add to that, people can only drive one car at a time. You can only live in one house at a time. You can only eat so much of sushi. So I think the tipping point I'm talking about, it's quite important, and we can't leave this in the hands of government. We were blessed to have the likes of Tambo, Mandela, Sisulu. At this point in time, we are challenged with our leadership, and we as a collective, as civil society, academia, labor, we need to get involved in turning around what is presently beginning to look like a human catastrophe. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Just for this round, we'll just take 2 final more. So Samantha Ashman will be followed by Crispin, and then we'll have a final round.
Sam Ashman from the University of Johannesburg. The authors quite understandably focused on the official data. Perhaps you could just give your thoughts about the questions of the unofficial data, because there is, there was more evidence revealed at the start of this week by the AIDC, but there is a lot of speculation about systematic transfer pricing by all the mining producers, but the platinum producers in particular. So the latest evidence is about systematic selling below market price via institutions in those well-known mining areas like the Canary Islands and so. So perhaps you could say a little about that issue.
Thanks very much. And then to Crispin, and sorry, Somabila, so you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm Crispin Chiguno, a postgraduate student, sociology. I think there's something we're missing here. We produce 80% of the global platinum is from here in South Africa. And our miners have been on strike for the past 4 months, coming towards 5 months. And when you look at the global price of the platinum, it has hardly sort of like remained the same. Can you reflect on why is it that we produce 80% of the world platinum, and our mines have been, miners have been on strike for the past 5 months, and the prices have remained almost constant?
And then Somabila to finish this round.
Thank you. My name is Somabila Mnona. I'm a researcher at Society Work and Development Institute. I just want to raise a red flag here concerning the issue of traditional leadership. I think we don't want to go out of this place thinking that the model of traditional leaders mediating the relationship between the mines and the communities is a supermodel. It is not. It is quite problematic, as shown by the examples of Bafokeng and the Bakhatla. There's so much inequality there, and people are so much dissatisfied because chiefs are not voted for. They are in power, and I'm not challenging that, but the fact that they are custodians of these revenues make them extremely unaccountable to people. As such, there is so much discontent, and it is shown in various forms. And I think that, I know, for instance, that has been lauded, I mean, particularly the African model, as the model through which communities can benefit. I want to say that communities don't benefit actually through that model. Many people who have lost their land, agricultural land and pastoral land, still suffer even through mining. They still suffer even today because they don't know what is happening with the revenues that are going to the hands of the chiefs and that are controlled by the chiefs in an autocratic manner. So that must be interrogated, and there's not enough time. I will say more about this question. Thank you.
Thanks for that excellent set of comments and questions. So over to the panel to respond where you feel you're able to.
Thanks. Okay, I'll do a few of those then. So the question from the gentleman from the Southern Africa Resource Watch about the issue of capital investment. Yeah, that's one of the things we looked at upon the advice of one of the SIMS authors, was the ratio of free cash flow over capital expenditure. So how much cash is the business producing once they've paid for their investment in a particular year. And we found that it was often through the boom kind of enormously higher than the level which SIMS recommended as being a threshold rate of return. They suggested 15%, which is a margin above the risk-free rate of about 7%. So yeah, it's an important area to look at, and it seems one that isn't really being looked at very much. This issue about Lonmin that Miriam raised, yeah, I mean, from the data we've got, they do have a higher share of labour value added through the boom period, but we're not talking dramatically above. I mean, they're getting kind of high 20s, mid 30s, whereas the other two companies are getting low 20s. They do dramatically worse during the crisis. In terms of why, well, the company complains about having a more difficult geology to deal with and a more difficult workforce, but it's not something I feel particularly equipped to comment on. But it does link to the question raised about transfer pricing and whether there's any skullduggery going on in that area. I mean, we were surprised looking at other measures like return on capital employed, about how much lower Lonmin were than the others, and several people suggested to us that there were some issues about a loan from a subsidiary which was being used to manipulate some of these. To be honest, without any firm evidence, I don't want to speculate myself on this, but it's an issue which seems to be being raised by a lot of people and does need some thorough investigation. And links again to this issue about transparency from the mining companies and how much information they're putting in the public domain. Okay, I'll pass over.
Okay, thanks. Two people raised the question of the 80% share. And I think this is again something touched on in the report, but not here. And it has got to do with the gain, the fiscal gain. Well, it's got to do with the long-term management of the industry. And the question is, can South Africa leverage its overwhelming its overwhelming share of this like resource to perhaps do centralized marketing where there's where the state intervenes and there's an attempt to both set and stabilize the platinum price, and what mechanisms can be used to make use of the dominance in this sector, and that's a long-term issue which needs careful thought. And again, the problem is that each of these issues is being dealt with in a bitsy kind of way. There's labour issues, there's mechanisation issues, there's this, and there's no coherent plan by industry, labour, and the government to how to manage these sorts of things. The other questions I'd like to kind of bundle together in a way and answer in terms of an analytical framework about shareholder value maximization, which was mentioned in Gavin's article in the Sunday Times on financialization, and which Sam Ashman is a specialist in. And this idea is that there's been a process of change in economic logic and corporate logic, where one of the aspects, which is termed financialization, and one of the aspects of that is maximizing returns to shareholders. So not retaining profit and investing that in a long-term manner. And we haven't looked at this in its entirety in this industry by any means. But the distribution, the sort of extremely large share of distribution to shareholders, even to the extent that there's not very much left over, speaks to this idea of the shareholder value maximization, as does things like share buybacks and things like that. And so, yes, there's. I can't speak to the issue of how would a large state share, which was asked, how would that alter corporate behavior? But it's possible that state shares could alter the corporate behavior to have a more long-term view, opposed to prioritizing this very short-term shareholder maximization view. Just to explain what transfer pricing is, Sam's question, it comes in various forms. One of the accusations that's been made is that basically the company sells to a shell company in the Cayman Islands at a below the market rate. That company then sells it on, which allows the company here to show that its profits are lower and the tax rate's lower in the second locale. So that's what Sam was asking about, and the AIDC released some information about this. I'm referring you to it, to which I'm not going to make any comment. The very last thing is this question of the price. Again, something which needs more research. I think that it's clear that there was stockpiling, so there was platinum to be sold even during the strike. The price can go up even if the supply, especially sometimes if the supply is constrained. And it also speaks to this issue of financialization, because one of the large demands for platinum has come from something called ETFs, which is basically a speculative fund where people are stockpiling it for investment purposes, and that's also impacted on the share price. Once again, things which those are just some sort of headlines, things which some detailed work.
Thank you. There was really no question directed to me, but I just need to say that, supporting what Prof was saying down there, this is more of a moral issue than the actual money. And we must take it from that angle. AMCO's offer on the table is the most reasonable and affordable one as far as I'm concerned. You must remember that in 2012, the workers wanted 12.5 now, not tomorrow. And that was promised to them. I mean, I was there. There were promises made, but promises were never fulfilled. Now AMCO is saying, okay, we'll try and compromise the position and say that we want 12.5 phased out over 4 years. Isn't that reasonable enough? Is that not affordable when you know that the platinum industry has made big profits before?